Morning, members. Welcome to the new room. I'll say a little bit more about that in a minute. But I've got to start off with a request. Is there any wood turners in the room? Because the bottom of half of my cabin's disappeared. So if somebody would like to turn a new one up at some time between now and the next meeting, I would appreciate it. Okay. Right. Let's go back to the beginning. We are here on the minutes of the last meeting on the 25th of November. Are there any comments on the minutes? No. I know what I should have asked for before that too. Apologies for absence. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies this morning's council meeting from councillors Long, Pennington and Rose. Thank you, Chair.
Right, thank you. Actually, Councillor Brazil not here, is he yet? You are joking. He'll turn up in a minute, don't worry about it. Minutes, okay, fine. Urgent business, I have some things to mention in item 5 in a minute. Item 3, exempt information, I have none that I'm aware of. Now, item 4, we'll move on to declarations of interest. Any members got declarations of interest? No, thank you. Before I go any further, Mr. White will be reminding me in a minute. I should have mentioned, because back in the room again now, safety drill. If the alarm does go off, it's not supposed to go off. Exit the doors on your way out into the car park as far as you can go. You know where the toilets and everything else is, so that's all that's dealt with. Right, business brought forward by myself. Item 1, the audit committee recommendation, that'll be considered agenda item 9H. The second item is 2 motions on notice to be considered that brought forward by Councillor Hodgson. Yes, it was, wasn't it? Yeah. They will go on to the end of the other 2 ones, and I promise I will not be cutting the meeting short today because with the split meeting having the budget this morning, so we should have ample time this afternoon to finish all that business. What I was going to say is just by the start, we're in our new room. It's not complete yet. One thing, normally members stand up. We found that's probably not possible as it is set out at the present time without catching yourself in the back of the leg. So it's all very new, but it's a new beginning. We've suffered the last 2 years in many ways as councillors, personally, and everything else. And I feel it's a new start. It's bright. It's good. And it brings me to think that how we have dealt with the last 2 years, where we have been through a very torrid time. And I think I've been advised, it was by Bert Bacharach about the wagon and losing his wheels. I think we were down to 1 wheel at one stage, and we're now putting them back on again. We're not there yet, but at least we're heading in the right direction, and we're getting a bit more freedom to do what we do. So that is that. There will be more decoration to come in here in time, but it's a work in progress. But it's bright, it's nice. I really like it. So we will then move on to item 6. The draft revenue and capital budget proposals, page 17 on your agenda pack. Mrs. Pearce, Councillor Pearce, would you like to introduce this, please?
Chairman, I'm right in thinking you don't want me to stand. Is that all right?
I did say don't stand because of the...
Fine. Okay. Well, good morning, everybody, and it's good to be at our budget council meeting back in our own chamber. So the budget proposes a council tax increase of £5 a year. This is an increase of less than 10 pence a week. To a residence with a Band D property, it's an increase of just 2.85% to £180.42, far lower than inflation, which is currently running above 5.4%. Whilst any increase is regrettable, it is right that we raise funding across our whole council tax base, that's all tax bands, to ensure that we can deliver services to everyone, and especially to those who need our help most. The positive impact and help this council can offer is more often than not goes unseen and unspoken, as indeed it should. But just occasionally, at times such as now, we must take the time to articulate the role the council has and the difference it makes to people's lives. Our residents are facing a significant rise in the cost of living, and there is no doubt that the support this council provides will be needed by more people more often. We are ready and willing to give the support, and this budget ensures that we will be able to do so. Each year, the council annually spends around £750,000 resourcing crucial services for those who need it, providing housing services, benefit services and schemes such as the Green Homes Grant. At the same time, through the council tax reduction scheme, we ensure that those in financial hardship are able to pay less council tax but get the full range and support of services. First of all, there's help with council tax bills. We are dealing with 5,100 active claims, with over 1,800 of these being working age applicants, and have awarded 5.8 million to reduce residents' bills. Worryingly, over 2.9 million has been awarded to those of working age. Help with housing rent arrears. We provide support for those that are struggling to pay rents and are already in arrears. So far, the council has paid £112,000 out to 193 claims in discretionary housing payments, and a further £20,000 will be paid out before the end of this financial year. This help is often coupled with much needed financial advice as well, to prevent further financial strain if possible. Helping with housing. The council has already declared a housing crisis in 2021 and is undertaking housing needs surveys and bringing forward new housing initiatives to support residents. By the end of the year, we will have distributed £158,000 from the Emergency Housing Fund and will have approved 219 claims from the Household Support Fund, a further £50,000. Before I close, I'd just like to mention two other initiatives in this budget. First, the Community Composting Scheme. This is a great offer to any communities who wish to start their own schemes, and we hope that they'll buddy up with the surrounding parishes to reduce the actual number of schemes and make sure that they are larger and better run, and will help their and our journey to net carbon goals too. The second is the Step Up scheme to help those in social housing to move into shared ownership. This is an initiative not only to open up home ownership aspirations to households who may never have thought this could be part of their dreams, but it will help us free up rental properties for families who may not be able to aspire to this, at least at the present time. Home ownership is a dream all families are entitled to have. This administration at the South Hams will not only deliver for residents' aspirations, but at the same time help all vulnerable people and, where they can, into socially rented properties. I commend this budget to you all.
Thank you, Councillor Pearce. Before I ask for questions, there's something else I should have mentioned to you. Make sure you switch on your mic when you do speak. In a second. And the other thing is, before we go, just be warned, don't go muttering anything under your breath, because apparently the mics are very sensitive. So any wry comments or whatever. Councillor Baston.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to continue the introduction that Councillor Pearce has given us. There are a few items I wanted to add to that, which is the first one, that we've given tremendous support through the pandemic. In the test and trace funding, the council has awarded over 720 claims and paid out £360,000. This work has been led by the Council's dedicated vulnerability officer, who on top of these numbers has supported 114 residents who most require our help, whether that be for debt, domestic abuse, safeguarding concerns and a raft of other issues. Without this service, it is likely that these residents would never have been able to access the support they require. The Council has paid out £84 million of COVID business grants direct to our hard-working businesses, which has supported a vital lifeline to many, protecting businesses and jobs when it is needed. We've helped to reduce heating bills. The Council has secured in the order of 1.75 million for improving the energy efficiency of the homes occupied by some of our most vulnerable residents. And with regard to economy and health and well-being, we are focusing on the economy and on building back better. This Council is delivering on its vision of a thriving economy, and we are investing in our visitor economy, providing business support and advice and providing grants for key town and coastal areas. Our continued investment and support for community leisure centres is also important. All our residents must be able to access these fantastic facilities. I am delighted to be able to report that participation is now starting to increase, and long may it continue. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Baston. Councillor Pannell, I believe, has raised his hand.
Sorry. Can you hear me? So it's only a technical point, but I'm afraid that sitting here with the wonderful new screens, I can only read the word agenda on that screen. I can't read any of the other words. So there's I don't know if some thought can be given to perhaps having repeater screens at either end of the room or something, but I'm finding I won't be able to follow anything on that screen.
Too small.
Do you want to?
I'm happy to swap places.
No, well, I mean, I can follow it on here, but there will be times when amendments and things come up. I'm making the point that it would be good if we could have perhaps smaller repeater screens at either end. I don't know if members at the far end feel the same or they're all right.
I wonder if it'd be worth experimenting with the light. There is a bit of reflection.
The size of the light.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll call on our Chief Executive.
So thank you, Chairman. I mean, this is our very first meeting in this room. There are bound to be some, teething problems as we go. We will have both screens in operation in due course. I think that should help. I think what we would ask actually is members to feedback on their experience today, and then we can think about what we can do about it. So bear with us, please, and we'll try and work through those things as we go. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
Okay, we have got our agenda on our own laptops as well. So, okay.
Sorry, Chairman, but that doesn't account for when there are amendments moved and things. The wording for those is very useful to have on the screen.
Yeah, we understand that, and it's noted, and we'll see what we can do, whether we can change the lights or whatever. But anyway, any further questions? Yeah. Yes, Councillor Baldry.
Can I refer, this is a question actually, on in the recommendations, lowercase Roman 11, which refers to the reserves. How on earth, Leader, can we justify a proposal to leave an operational level of £2 million for unearmarked reserves? By definition, unearmarked reserves are not allocated for anything. We have just been through a major crisis, which has been a worldwide pandemic. That would have been the sort of occasion when we needed reserves. I cannot see in my mind any occasion when we would need as much as £2 million of taxpayers' money to be used and to sit idly in the bank? How can we justify a level of reserves of that type?
Councillor Baldry, thank you for that question. I think there are two parts of this, and I may ask Mrs Buckle to come in with the technical answer. But I know that we are following the recommendations set down by SIPFA, and I believe that it is the £2 million was set some time ago, but I believe there's a further requirement now because of the borrowing we hold and the annual repayments. But I'll ask Mrs Buckle to give you the full technical answer on that, Councillor Baldry.
Mrs Buckle?
Thank you, Leader. I refer members to page 43 of the agenda, which is appendix in the Appendix G. And that looks at SIPFA have issued something called a Financial Resilience Index for 2022. And that compares council's levels of reserves. It benchmarks it nationally against both nearest neighbours and also non-metropolitan districts. You can see on page 44 that our level of reserves have been benchmarked against those comparative groups. And you can see that the bar on the left is showing that actually our level of reserves are above the midpoint in terms of an indicator of financial stress, so higher risk. So what that is saying is our level of reserves are probably lower than comparators across nearest neighbours, but also non-metropolitan districts. So it's both in the light of the Financial Resilience Index, this is something that SIPFA issue annually, but also, as the leader has said, we now have borrowing of £15 million. And if you look at the sensitivity analysis, which is set out in Appendix G, that looks at things like what if our savings were to be reduced? What if we had an increase in budget pressures? It looks at different sensitivities around things like council tax income, business rate income, our income streams. And on the basis of that, yes, when members considered the medium-term financial strategy, members approved setting a minimum level of 1.5 million, but that is the minimum level that we would ever want to go down to. I would not advise that we should ever be down at that minimum level of 1.5 million. And in terms of our day-to-day operating, we should be at least £500,000 above that. And be at a level of around 2 million. And actually, if you look back at the council's level of unearmarked reserves, going back sort of 5-10 years ago, they were much higher than 2 million. So in terms of my recommendation is that we have a minimum operating level of 2 million, and the lowest we would ever go down to is 1.5 million. Thank you, Chairman.
Briefly coming back, Chairman, if I can, very briefly. Yeah. I'll have more to say during the debate, but my question really was, if we haven't needed that amount of money during what has been a seriously bad time with the pandemic, can you give me a single example when we would likely to need anything like £2 million?
Chairman, my response to that would be that we know that there are future funding reforms coming, and those are set out in the report, particularly around, we know that new homes bonus funding, which gives us £1 million at the moment, we know that that is going to cease, and we have no certainty of anything that will replace that. So that's £1 million of funding that we are currently using to fund both our capital programme and our revenue budget. We also know that the business rate baseline is due to be reset. We think that will be in 23-24. And that means that we will lose business rate income because we will lose the growth that we have had since business rates was localised in 2013. We also know that in terms of negative revenue support grants, so this is our share of government cuts which have not yet been implemented, is over 300,000. If that were to be implemented in 23-24, as we've got budgeted for, that's going to give us at least a 400,000 budget gap for the next financial year. So there are things coming that are down the road. We've also got the fair funding review. My sense of that is that district councils may not fare very well out of that, and funding may go to the upper tiers that deliver social care, and the concern is that district councils will not fare well out of the fair funding review. So we've got a lot of funding reforms that are coming very shortly in 23-24, that I think the council needs to be prepared for. Thank you.
Chairman, I was heeding your advice and doing my best not to mutter, as Mrs. Buckle said.
Noted, Councillor Baldry. Councillor Hopwood, you have a question?
My question was, what is the budget gap going to be next year? Do we know what it is? And my question has just been answered by Mrs. Buckle, which is that it's going to be, as of today, without any other cuts at all from government, £400,000. So my comment to my question is, thank goodness we are a prudent council, and we are looking after our finances admirably.
Councillor Brazil.
Thank you, Chairman, and apologies for being late.
Before you start, I'll warn you, you weren't here. As Councillor Baldry has just alluded to, do not mutter, because the mics are very good at picking up everything. So I'm not saying you will, but just be careful you don't say something you wish you hadn't.
No, it was a question that a member of the public was very keen that I ask, and that was in respect of some of the developments, and in particular the Aldi and Ivy Bridge. And wondered where that came within the proposed capital projects.
I'm sure the leader can answer you.
Mrs. Buckle?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. That project has already been approved and therefore is already within the Council's capital programme. So it will show in reports that go to the Executive on the capital programme monitoring report. The capital budget proposals that are before members today are only new capital projects that have not yet been approved by Council. That project was approved by Council in February 2021. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hodgson, did you want to ask a question?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, that's actually probably just been possibly answered, but my question was around the holding of monies that we agreed to spend on sites for traveller sites. I understand that is still rolling forward as a programme, but I couldn't see that in there. To be honest, if it is going to be the same answer from Lisa, which I more than appreciate, it is actually quite helpful sometimes to see rollover monies, so we can actually see that pattern of what's sitting there for certain things. But maybe Lisa could answer them anyway if it's different to what she answered earlier.
Thank you.
Sorry, I was just asking Mr. Powell about the gypsy site and whether he could comment on that.
Mr. Powell, would you like to say anything on this subject?
If I'm honest, Chair.
Can I just correct that? Actually, it's gypsy and travellers. It's not just gypsies.
Sorry. Sorry, Chair. No, it's not something I'm aware of, so I can't report back on this stage.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Chairman, I would assume that is being held within the affordable housing reserve, so that any monies that we need to spend on that are likely to come out of that reserve, because that would be the right title for it to be found.
Mr. Bates is going to come.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't have the answer, but we'll make sure we get you a detailed answer, Councillor Hodgson.
Can I just add? Sorry, I divided it into two. Sorry.
Yes, Councillor Hodgson.
It's very quick. Just to say, we've declared a housing crisis. Why isn't there anything in here about wanting to set aside monies to actually support that by actually being our own developer?
Yeah, Chairman, I can answer that. Spending money on building new houses does not answer the immediate housing crisis. That's why we're taking a number of measures to increase better occupation of stock, to try and get more long-term lets on the market by reducing the number of short-term lets, and moves such as those because those will alleviate the housing crisis much more quickly than building houses for which there is almost inevitably a minimum 5-year delay.
Thank you. Councillor Sweet, I think you had your hand up, and then I'll come to Councillor Jackson after that.
Right, thank you, Chair.
Councillor Jackson?
Yeah, could you just remind me how you're reducing short-term rents in the area?
Yes, we are. First of all, we're looking into the number of them, and some work has been done by Plymouth City Council on that. And secondly, we are lobbying government very hard to change, first of all, the planning class. We've got, as you know, an end or more stringent regulations over getting onto business rates. And we're also doing some work on our own short-term lets. At the moment, there's nothing much coming out of it, I agree, but we are doing the spade work to try and get that resolved, because it is a serious problem. We all know that. It's how we tackle it best, but probably through the planning class and also through better regulation. So if short-term lets go onto the same regulation basis as London have got, then that will reduce the number of short-term lets, because they're only allowed to let for a certain number of nights a year. And I think they probably won't like it and they'll see the sense of going back to long-term lets.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Have I missed anybody? No? Okay, then I'll ask Councillor Pearce, the leader, to formally move the recommendation.
Chairman, I move the recommendations number 1 to 12 on pages 19 and 20 of the agenda papers.
Thank you. Councillor Basson, would you like to formally second that?
I will second that.
Do you wish to speak now?
Sorry?
Do you wish to speak to it now?
No, I won't. No.
Do you want to withhold your...
Yes, please.
Right. The motion is now open to debate. Councillor Birch.
I propose an amendment which has been forwarded to the Chief Executive.
Is there a seconder for that? Yes. Thank you, Councillor Brazil. Have we got the... That's, oh yes, is there, isn't it? Is everybody aware of the amendment? Yeah, we'll work on this. This is something that we're aware of, that probably, but it should be on your because this was submitted anyway. So, yeah.
Shall I speak to it? Would you like me to speak to the motion?
Yeah.
The amendment?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I understand, this proposed amendment was circulated by Mr. White earlier on this week by email. So if I could speak in support of the amendment. Now, this is a call for a standstill when it comes to the level of council tax to be paid by those we represent. There can be no doubt that we and the residents find ourselves in exceptional circumstances, and I believe on this occasion we should break away from the normal practice of raising council tax each year. Those we represent are suffering and will suffer from significant cost of living increases that are predicted to reach a record 7%. This is in addition to the predicted rise of about 50% in energy costs. The last thing that the residents of South Hams want from this council is an increase in their council tax in these difficult times, especially against a local background of an incomplete waste collection service. There can be no doubt, there can be no dispute that since April of last year, the residents of South Hams have been badly served when it comes to the waste collection service. The facts speak for themselves. As a result of FCC's continual breaches of contract, the council has been entitled to make a substantial number of financial deductions, and yet nothing is mentioned in the budget figures. The unacceptable disruption and inconvenience suffered by our residents as a result of the continued failure by FCC in delivering the waste collection service on its own warrants a reduction in council tax. A council tax standstill is the least we can do to compensate the residents of South Hams. In representing the residents of South Hams, we should not be increasing council tax in these difficult times, and what's more, we should acknowledge an increase is not warranted as a result of the continual failure by FCC to provide a waste collection service residents expect and deserve. The proposal, or the amendment, if passed, will not, and I emphasise, will not result in any cuts in services. It will still maintain a balanced budget, and furthermore, it is financed out of a reserve account where funds have been languishing unspent for several years. It is time to use these funds for the benefit of those we represent. I move the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. I assume, Councillor Brazil, you reserve the right until the debate?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Just hear what other people have to say. Thank you,
Right.
Chairman.
Councillor Taylor.
Yes, thank you very much. I got to bow to, obviously, Councillor Birch. He's probably much more au fait with accounting than I am. That's why he got money and I hasn't. But I want to know how we actually replenish probably the 2 million we lose over the next 10 years. Because £200, 200,000, and that over 10 years is 2 million. How would they suggest we actually replenish that? Because it's just not going to be happening. It's not possible to do that without, and we got a limit on what we can raise taxes. So that's the question, really.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chairman. I think that Councillor Pearce, as the leader, highlighted and acknowledged several of the problems that Councillor Birch has highlighted in his amendment regarding things like the cost of living locally and indeed the work that the council do to support local residents as a result. To be very clear, as a Conservative, I'm very keen on the idea of reduced taxes where it's possible to do so. It's one of the things that motivates me quite significantly. But even more so, I find, and even more important, is basically sound and competent financial management of what is ratepayers' money, because it's not our money, it's that provided to us by ratepayers to undertake services. So I think the long and medium term impact of this amendment would potentially severely hamper the council's ability to provide the services it does. It will leave us with some potentially very, very difficult decisions to make in 12 and 24 months' time when councillors are again making these budget decisions, because some of the money simply won't be there. The council's officers, I believe, have done a very good job, as always, of putting together a budget in what is very difficult circumstances. And the Section 151 officer has already highlighted the importance of reserve levels to the council in terms of sound financial management. So I'm afraid I won't be able to support the amendment proposed by Councillor Birch and seconded by Councillor Brazil. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. I'll take Councillor Hodgson next and then Councillor Baston after that.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm happy to support this amendment. My reasons are twofold. Normally, I would be very supportive of council tax increases because I think it's really important that the public services are well resourced and supported. And I think it's a fair tax normally, and it's usually a fair rise when we just have that, couple of percent a year. But there's two reasons I think that we really owe it to our local people on this particular year. This is just, for as far as I'm concerned, it's a 1 year that I would support this. One is the clear anguish that many people have been through with our waste delivery services. And so many people have written to me, and I'm sure to many other fellow councillors, about the fact that they haven't had their waste collected properly, or it's a mess, or whatever. And even last week, all the stuff flying off the vehicles. It's been a horrendous thing to kind of be a councillor, and I think we owe it to our residents to show something back. And I think this is one way of doing it. The second point is that we know this is an extraordinary year in terms of, as we emerge from COVID, and people are wanting to kind of think about, coming out and breathing some fresh air again. It's coming into a different world of cut. The Brexit mess, all the various things that are going on for people, the rise in national insurance, and the high energy bills are hitting people really hard. And I think this is actually a fair thing to do this year. It's not going to be a massive thing to resolve everybody's problems, but I do think it's a gesture of very serious goodwill, and I think it will give people something back when the number of people that have been frantically writing to us and our officers asking for a rebate on their council tax because of the bad service for the last year. So I think 200,000 isn't a huge amount. It's just this year. It's coming out of reserves, it's been proposed to come out of reserves, and I think that's fair.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Councillor Baston, and then Councillor Smart.
Thank you, Chairman. Whilst it is council services for our residents that are my priority, I must also set out for you, members, the financial pitfalls of the amendment. If council tax is not increased next year, there will be a loss of council income to the council of 200,000 for the next year and every year thereafter. Furthermore, nowhere in the amendment does it address where the 200,000 loss of council tax will come in future years. The amendment is proposing to take £200,000 from new homes bonus funding for next year. But what about the years following? For the next 2 years will increase by 400,000, increasing it to